Welcome to Superhero Pow. I'm your host nerd, Tom Prender. Hey, how you doing today? Buying a good comic books lately? What about Marvel's Blood Hunt? Jed MacKay and Pepe Larraz's Vampires vs. the Marvel U book. Seems a long time in coming considering this new Dracula first hit the X-Men back in 2011. But hey, I guess Marvel is just showing some restraint. And while not trying to spoil anything, because so far I've been finding it a decent read, Dracula appears not to be the villain. Subverted our expectations, didn't they? Well, being cheeky again, they also seem to be stealing a page from Steve Niles' 30 Days of Night. But in typical superhero style, the whole world is experiencing eternal night. Gotta ratchet up the stakes, don't you? But again, I'm happy with it. Meanwhile, over at DC, there's an army of Lobos working for Brainiac, which just doesn't seem like a very creative idea. I mean, sure, the Avengers and everyone else, I guess, fighting vampires isn't a brilliant idea, but I'll put that idea up higher than, say, the leader and having an army of Hulks, which is pretty much all DC is doing here. The only ideas DC ever seems to have these days is, well, just more of it. Green Lantern? Well, how about more of it? Superman? Well, how about more of it? Or sometimes they'll just change a prefix of something. You got adamantium? Well, we got Batmanium. You got a Speed Force? Well, we got the Still Force. Not really big ideas if you ask me. But let's go back to bagging on Marvel. Or rather, the entire industry. See, the thing that really ruffles my feathers about Blood Hunt is the red band version of it. You see, Marvel tossed in a few extra pages of blood and gore, and the script and even the lettering doesn't seem to appear to change. It's just some of the artwork. And then they wrap it all in a red plastic bag and charge you an extra $1 for it. Now, while on some level this seems like it could be fun, you can buy the rated PG-13 comic book, or you can buy the rated R version of the comic book. But overall, I'm kind of left asking the question, why? Why do we need two versions? I mean, aside from like a movie studio messing around with the director's vision of a film, do we really need more than one version of a movie? Do we really need all these Star Wars special edition movies where Jabba the Hutt shows up and Greedo shoots first? Does this really help with the storytelling or the enjoyment of the product? I'm inclined to think no. So, aside from personal hubris of a creator to get multiple versions of his movie out there, the main reason is money, especially when it comes to comic books, because comic books has a history and its current business model is based on sales gimmicks. Now, as I mentioned before, the current business model of the comic book industry is selling the same comic twice. Hell, that's what the whole facsimile line is about. Those comic books were bought and paid for decades ago, and now they're just reselling them. They're, aside from the cost of printing, they're pure profit. Mind you, if you weren't around back then, they're fun. I bought a few of them myself. I like it when they include all the extras of, the old ads and text stories in it. When you get a trade paperback, they kind of cut out all that fun stuff and just give you the meat of the story. So on some level, I like the facsimile line books. But the main business of comic books right now is selling a new comic book multiple times with variant covers. Collectors and speculators probably make up more than half of the buying public right now. So that's where the money is. Variant covers can sell 25% more comics of an issue than it would have sold if it only had one cover. On the extreme side, I've seen sales increase by 300%. This is what's keeping the comic book industry in the black right now. So on the good side, comic book sales have gone up every year. But comic book sales also might not be that great if you subtracted all the variant cover issue sales. So on some level, it's hard to know if the sales are really going up every year, or are they just making and selling more variant covers? What's the business? Are we selling comic books or are we selling variant covers? And this is what the red band issues of Blood Hunt is. Just another trick to sell multiple copies to collectors and speculators. Okay, so the publishers are paying more for art than just a cover this time around. But they're also charging for it too. You have to pay an extra $1. And based on what I've heard from the comic book stores around me, it's working. So Blood Hunt and the red band versions are probably going to be a big hit. So comic books will probably soon adapt this as their everyday business model, a la variant covers. So hooray! Everybody wins, right? Fans get rated R versions of mainstream comics. Speculators have more to speculate with. Stores and publishers sell more comics. Well, I'd argue maybe it's not quite a boon for the stores, because while the publishers paid less for the red band version, only a few extra pages or panels, the stores still have to pay the same price. If that's confusing, I'll give you an example. Say it costs Marvel, based on the print run and yada, 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 $1.50 to make an issue of Blood Hunt. Then the red band version is only going to cost like 50 cents. I'm pulling this number out of my butt, just so you know. Now, for people really paying attention, yes, you can slide the production cost across the whole print run, but that's not the point. Marvel wants to show profit, not hide it. Anyway, they turn around and sell the book to the comic book stores for like, $2.99. That's $2.99 for the regular and $2.99 for the red band. So now you can see why it's a bigger win for the publishers than it is for the stores. They're paying less for it. But still, selling more comics, it's all good, right? So now, why do I think this is a bad thing? Took you long enough to get to that, Tom. Well, it's a bad thing because I think it's a band-aid. It's another case of short-term profits over long-term gains. And in this day and age, which basically started in the late 70s, short-term profits are surprisingly more important to businesses than long-term gains. All right, stand back, folks. Here it comes. You see, this is because stock prices go up with short-term gains, like 100% of the time. You got a short-term gain, stocks will shoot up in price. Where long-term gains do not move the needle at all. It's super hard for people to wrap their heads around what is a long-term gain, what does it look like, what does it mean, how do we measure it? Overall degree, it's, we're going to make money 5-10 years from now. That's a long-term gain. Most people can't fathom that. And most people are probably going to sell their stock before any long-term gain hits. And also in this world of what have you done for me lately, management doesn't get rewarded for long-term gains. So they get rewarded for short-term gains. Sales bumps. Oh, it went up today. Great job, Biff. Keep up the good work. It's the old ant and the grasshopper story. Because for the most part, everyone is a grasshopper. If everyone was an ant, we wouldn't keep telling the story. Back to comic books. Well, everyone pretty much agrees the comic book industry is in bad shape. Yes, as I said, the sales are going up every year, but we're not quite factoring in the variant comic sales in that. But comic books also have to compete with video games on your cell phone, YouTube videos, and everything else in the world. Plus, the bulk of comic book sales come from specialty shops that the general public will never go into. And their product is becoming just as rigid as the small pool of readers who go into a comic book shop. So it's not good out there. And to really fix it, it'll take a ton of time and money, and publishers are just not interested in that. They want short-term gains that they can get rewarded for, not long-term gains. So they just want another gimmick to sell the same comic book twice and get their sales bump. Everybody's happy. But here's the thing, right? You gotta figure that speculators and collectors are gonna hit a breaking point sometime, right? And what happens then? And a lot of comic book shops stay in business because they sell other stuff. A store can't make it on the sale of new comics alone. And what happens when the selling the same thing twice method fails? Yikes. That's why I don't like this. If we had a healthy marketplace, then why not? But I'm telling you, this is being seen as the next big thing in comic books. Multiple versions, especially now that Blood Hunt is going to be the success that it looks like it's going to be. So it's going to be pretty darn interesting to see where we go from here. Comic books is sure a weird business. Survives mostly on passion. But what do you think about this? Am I just being a doomsaying, nervous nanny? Maybe I am. Either way, thanks for spending time with me. If you could be so kind to like, subscribe, and notify, I'll keep talking about my comic book addiction. Take care of yourself out there.